Masahiro Sakurai is the last great developer at Nintendo, a company who used to be known for great developers, recognizable faces that signified you were about to play a great game as long as they were involved. The Nintendo logo alone used to represent that, but we all know that's not the case anymore, and slowly those recognizable faces have begun to fade away. They've either taken on smaller and smaller roles in development, or have created such a disappointment that I can no longer trust them to make good games. Tears of the Kingdom, even if you liked it, you cannot deny it shows a profound lack of ambition to reuse a map for a game whose main selling point is exploration. You would have to be delusional to say the game would be worse off if it had a new map where you didn't know what was around every corner. And although I'm criticizing Aonuma here, at least people know who he is. Nobody even knows who the modern developers for Nintendo are. Although I get some criticism for it, there's a reason why all of my thumbnails use Miyamoto. He is the face of Nintendo. Despite barely even working in games anymore, he still appears in the Nintendo Directs, he still has a legacy, and people still recognize him. I would love to use the president of Nintendo, but no one even knows who he is. Furukawa, the president of one of the biggest gaming companies on the planet, who has a monopoly on most people's childhoods, doesn't even have a face for his Wikipedia page. There's a reason people use faceless suit as an insult, because without a face, there is no responsibility. When Nintendo acquires an illegal patent, or Joy-Cons drift, or they release $20 pointless DLC that was cut from the main game, who are you going to blame? Not Furukawa, even though he is probably the most responsible, and it's because no one knows who he is. And it shows deliberate cowardice, because you can always just blame Nintendo, but we are humans. We know it is people who are making these decisions. And if you don't have autism, people are recognized by their face. So if you have to put a face to the company who is doing the bad things, you're stuck with Miyamoto. But it goes both ways. When the company does something good, you want to put a face to that, so that the next time that person makes something, you'll be there because you know it will be great. This concept is what Nintendo was built off of. Oh, Miyamoto's directing this? Of course it's going to be good. Aonuma's directing this? Of course it's going to be good. Sakurai made this? Of course it's going to be good. And it's now that we finally get to the point of the video, with Nintendo stocks at an all-time low, where you can't go anywhere without hearing how bad Nintendo is. Here comes Sakurai, here to save the day, with an hour and 45 minutes talking about his new game and how excited he is for it and just how good it's going to be, and I can't help but believe him. And others seem to agree. You have people saying you're a bad person for owning a Switch 2, that it is morally reprehensible to own a video game console, saying that, I don't know, this Kirby thing looks pretty cool. And the secret all along was love. It always has been, and it always will be love. And that is why there is no face of Nintendo. For Furukawa to be the face of Nintendo, he would have to face us in a direct and talk about how excited he is about new Nintendo games. Something he cannot do. These businessmen are snakes, but they're not good enough liars to fake love. You cannot fake excitement for an hour and 45 minutes, an unprecedented amount of time. He had to ask specifically for this. He said, Nintendo, listen to me. I worked in the Smash mines for 5,000 years. You will give me my baby game that won't sell at all, because the first one didn't. You'll give me as much money as I need to make it, and I want a 45-minute direct. And they said, okay, Sakurai, you did a lot for us, so fine. And he's like, you know what? I changed my mind. I actually want 2 directs, and the second one's even longer. You can't fake that. You just can't. And that's all I've ever wanted, not just from Nintendo, but from every game developer, is someone who actually cares about what they're doing. Making a video game is not like working at a convenience store. To make a good game, you have to actually be excited about what you're doing. Because if you hate your job, you hate the customers, you think what you're doing is lame, why should we think it's cool? Why should we be excited to play it? There's a reason no one came out to tell us how excited they were about the Donkey Kong DLC and all these cool things about it. No, we got a generic advertisement because there was no love there. There's no love in DLC. In fact, it came from the man himself. I can't believe they let him say this, by the way. Sakurai himself said there will be no continuation. There will be no DLC. There is no live service. And why? Because he put everything he possibly could into the game, which is what a video game should be. You should do your best. Is that absurd? Is that insane to say you should do your best every time? That I hate DLC because I know it's cut content every time. I simply don't buy it. That, oh, we just didn't have enough time. We couldn't fit it into the main game. Then either delay the game or make a sequel. I'm tired of it. I don't want DLC anymore. That's half-baked content that should have been in the main game to begin with. I don't know how everyone seems to forget that Switch 1 games used to receive free updates over time, which should signal to you that the game was blatantly unfinished and then they finished it over time through updates, but it's okay because it was free. Now they're doing the exact same thing, releasing unfinished games, except why make it free when people will pay for it? It's the same system, but more anti-consumer. But not Sakurai. Sakurai straight up tells you, nope, everything I possibly could put in the game is in the game. And this is why it's so important to put a face to a game, because when a developer says something like that, it builds trust. Where Sakurai's next game, I know, even if it ends up having DLC later, not this one, if this has DLC, then he's a liar and we can't trust him. Highly doubt that though. But if his next game ends up having DLC, I'll know at the very least it was not cut content and that he put everything he possibly could in. And that's not just based on this statement. It's based on action, what he actually produces. Sakurai games are known for having absurd amounts of content. Smash Bros. Ultimate had 74 characters. That is insane. You know for a fact that the DLC characters weren't cut from the game because they couldn't possibly have put more in. Compare that to Legends ZA, which feels like an unfinished game at launch. Has barely any content at all. A single underground area, a city where you can't go in the buildings. It's not just that DLC's unacceptable. It's that making an unfinished game and then upselling you the finished product is unacceptable. Or at least it should be. Instead, it's a breath of fresh air to finally have a developer just say, we did everything we could. There is nothing we wanted to put in this game that we couldn't do. And although he made that DLC comment at the end, he proved this point at the very start of the second direct, where he brings up Top Ride. And if you don't know, the original Kirby Air Ride had 3 modes, one of which was a top-down racing mode that basically nobody played or cared about. It was mildly amusing to mess with sometimes. And Sakurai even acknowledges this. He says, if we didn't put it in the game, I don't think most people would care. But they put it in anyway. They did it anyway. And why? Why would they do this? Why would they put all of this effort into remaking, revamping, improving a mode that no one cared about? I mean, I checked the chart. I asked the businessman. They said it's a waste of money. You won't get a return on investment. Will this really improve sales? The focus group even said that 99% of players wouldn't care. Yeah, but what about the 1%? What about the people who didn't even know they wanted it? What about the people who never even got to try it in the first place? What about the fact that a sequel should be bigger and better than the original? What about pride? What about knowing you did the most you could possibly do? That's what I mean by love, about truly caring about what you're making. It's ignoring all logic, ignoring things like return on investment or a proper use of time, just doing what you know in your heart is right. That wouldn't it be cool if we brought back every mode? And actually, there's even more modes. And we'll have achievements. That thing that no other Nintendo game does. And guess what? Those achievements will unlock things. Real content in the game. Remember unlockables? Old games used to give you something for your achievements. New cosmetics, new characters, new other C words. Something to reward the player for engaging with the game. Giving you more content, more reason to play. And this system has been entirely absent from modern games. Not for accessibility, not because only 20% of players may ever unlock it. It's because they would much rather sell that cosmetic to you than you receive it for free in the game for playing the game. When you receive a reward, that behavior is being encouraged. So when you get an achievement in a game and you're rewarded with more content, you're incentivized to keep improving and playing the game, which sounds really cool for the player, but for those faceless suits, wouldn't it make far more sense to reward the player with more content by spending money, incentivizing them to spend money? I mean, the game even has an in-game currency and a shop where you can buy cosmetics. Come on, Sakurai, just make it so that you could buy that in-game currency with real money. But no, he made a complete game that he wanted to be good. So you earn the currency by playing the game and having fun. And this is the most psychotic part, you can be the one selling the cosmetics. You can customize your ride and then sell it on the marketplace to earn in-game currency, which you can then use to buy other people's customized rides. I just keep imagining Sakurai having a random good idea and being like, Nintendo, I need an extra $10 million so I can add a real marketplace to my baby Kirby game. That probably won't sell. And Nintendo just has to say, okay. They're like, okay, Sakurai, you can have your extra 10 million, but back to the Smash Bros. Mines after this for another 10,000 years. By the way, I'm very excited to draw a big ol' wiener on my cart and then get permanently banned from Nintendo Online. And let's talk a little bit more about this concept of bigger and better. A concept that even when it isn't done well is universally appreciated. I'm talking Pokemon Gold and Silver, which had the entirety of Red and Blue Kanto included in the game, making it objectively larger, 2 regions instead of 1, and it was done profoundly poorly. Kanto is a joke in that game. The levels don't make any sense. There really isn't any reason for you to be there, and yet still to this day people talk about how cool it was, how much they love those games, and how Game Freak should do it again. There is a value to scale. And bringing it back to Sakurai, Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, everyone is here, every single character returns, and Sakurai had to sacrifice a lot for it. Ultimate is heavily lacking in a lot of that single player content I was talking about before, but it was clearly worth it. People talk about Smash Ultimate like it's one of the greatest games ever made, and Sakurai, my boy, still recognizes the power of this, because in Kirby Air Riders, you get 9 new racetracks, which doesn't sound like a lot, but the main mode is a giant map with a ton of minigames. But along with those 9 new tracks, you get all of the old ones. All 9 have been remade and put in the game. Why? Because bigger and better. Why not? Put everything you can in it. Something that easily could have been DLC. But no, this is why I love Sakurai. He thinks like a player. He wants to give people no reason to ever play the original again. And all of this stuff is the Sakurai special. He's been doing this forever. Do you remember trophies in the Smash games? These served no function at all. They don't do anything. And maybe the vast majority of players will never care about them. But for the people that do, they're cool, they add flavor, they give you some info on the games they come from. They're fun to collect, and they give you a reason to keep playing the game. At a certain point, developers realized that they could replace content with online multiplayer. That old multiplayer games had single player modes, ton of unlockables, lots of random mini games, because they knew that you can't always have a friend over, that you're going to want to play the game by yourself at some point, maybe even the majority of the time. But with online multiplayer, you can play with other people all the time, but other people aren't that entertaining. Playing with a bunch of randos on the internet is not the same as playing with your friends on the couch. Sure, there are multiplayer games that people put hundreds of hours into, but that's incredibly rare. For every one multiplayer game like Fortnite that goes crazy, there's 100 that no one plays. And even the games like Fortnite that do succeed, those games have insane amounts of content constantly. A slow drip feed of new maps, new weapons, new mechanics to keep ADHD-fueled zoomies entertained. And I would much rather have a big big, hearty single player, tons of achievements, tons of unlockables, many different modes, and a story mode, which we'll talk about later, then have a ranked mode that drives people insane. Why does every game have ranked? Because it is endless content. It is something to accomplish. You're unlocking something, but it's infuriating. I have been in the top rank of multiple games, and I promise you, you cannot find a more miserable group of people than the people who play ranked multiplayer. And it's funny, I feel like Sakurai recognizes this. And since the days of Super Smash Bros. Brawl, he has hated competitive multiplayer, which has resulted in the funniest omission of all time in Kirby Air Riders. That the time attack mode, where you're trying to get your best time on the tracks in the race mode, has no online leaderboard. An intentional omission, because video games are supposed to be fun. If you find improvement fun, then improve against yourself or your friends, not an invisible person with a probably cheated time who you will never meet or see. And it's not like these leaderboards won't end up existing anyway, except now they'll be relegated to actual websites or communities where you will know those people. And honestly, I just think it's based that he doesn't like competitive people because they're gross and icky and smell bad, and I don't like them. But it's still good for those other reasons too. Now, the game does still have a power ranking, which I'm sure some people will be obsessed over, but it's very far from a ranked mode. So without an endless multiplayer grind, they supplemented it with single player content. And in this case, we get a ton of unlockables, ton of costumes, ton of characters, gummies, which do nothing they just exist for some reason. I love Sakurai, tons of achievements, but most importantly of all is the story mode, the Subspace Emissary. The story mode for Super Smash Bros. Brawl might be the greatest thing created by any human ever. And unfortunately, this concept was abandoned for the dumbest possible reason. We never got another Subspace Emissary because people were watching the cutscenes on YouTube. Yes, really, that's why. Now, who knows how actually true that is? Maybe it has more so to do with it was a lot of work, but that's the reason we were given, that Sakurai thought people weren't actually playing the mode and were just watching all the cutscenes on YouTube, which is obviously absurd. People are re-watching the cutscenes because they were so cool. So Smash 4, we got basically nothing. Smash Ultimate, we got World of Light, which was not good. It had one piece of story at the very end and one piece of story in the very beginning. In the actual gameplay, not the greatest. But finally, we're coming home. I can see it. A real story mode with cool cutscenes, including my little ball guy. And normally, I'm the kind of guy who hates cutscenes. I hate anything that stops me from playing the game. But Subspace Emissary was the greatest thing ever. They were short scenes that existed only to endear you toward the characters and show you interactions between characters that you already love and would never get to see interact otherwise. It was pure fan service. And now this is the part that I'm most speculative about, because we didn't get to see basically any of it in an hour and 45 minutes. But I understand it's the story, you don't want to spoil it. So this is the only one I'm a little tentative about. Maybe it'll be great, maybe it'll be terrible, but at least I know for a fact Sakurai's gonna try. He's gonna do his best to make it as great as it possibly can be. And if it ends up sucking, it's not because he didn't have enough money, or he just didn't care that much, or some suit told him to make it wrong, and that's good enough for me. Now, is this all worth it to buy a Switch 2? That the Switch 2 gets one good game as a treat? Well, we had a similar situation before with Metroid Prime 4. It was a game that people never thought they were going to get and was announced for the new console, so of course you had to buy it, and then it never came out. But this, I think, is a little different, given we've gotten so much more information, and we know for a fact the release date is November 20th. But as great as I think this game will be, I don't know if it's worth buying a console for one game. But if you did, at least it would be good, and you could only get that game on this console, as opposed to someone else we may know who bought a console for a game he didn't like and knew he would not like, that he could have just played on the Switch 1 anyway, and did end up playing on the Switch 1 anyway. That guy must be real dumb. Couldn't be me. But even if this doesn't change your purchasing decisions, I think it's important to recognize when something good is actually done. Because if you just blindly hate everything, then your hate doesn't matter anymore. And as a grade A #1 hater, my hate is the only thing that's important to me. So I'll take this time to recognize that Sakurai is the GOAT. He's still the GOAT. He's still making great games. and still cares about making games. And I will use this information to direct my hatred only more vigorously at the rest of the horrible things that Nintendo does. Because this means very clearly that they have the capability to make things that are good and are simply choosing not to. That passionate developers do exist, but they would much rather give Aonuma $100 million to make a $70 DLC. God, what I would do to have Sakurai care about Pokemon and then him just take over Game Freak. Anyway, I'll probably end up streaming the beta test to Kirby Air Ride, so catch you there. Bye.